You probably look at your blue jeans and think you've got it all figured out, right? Like, oh, it's indigo, the plant must just be blue. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you'd be completely wrong. It's a super common misconception, and frankly, assuming that misses the absolute coolest part of this whole thing. The leaves of the indigo plant are actually green, and extracting that famous blue dye requires hacking a massive, complex biological glitch in the plant. So in this explainer, we're going on a little journey through chemistry, history, and global economics to uncover the real secrets of the world's most famous dye. Okay, let's just dive right into this.
To really understand indigo, you have to toss out everything you think you know about color. We are dealing with what I like to call the invisible blue glitch. The living plant itself, it doesn't contain a single trace of blue pigment. None. The beautiful, rich denim color you're picturing simply does not exist in nature as a ready-made dye. We literally have to force the plant to create it by triggering a very specific multi-step breakdown.
Look, I see people all the time assuming the color is just hiding inside the leaves, waiting to be squeezed out like a blueberry. Let me stop you right there. You could sit around crushing these green leaves in your hands all day long, you could smash them with a rock, and you would never, ever see a drop of blue. That's because the plant stores a completely colorless compound called indigo. It keeps this compound safely locked away inside the vacuoles of its living leaves. It's a chemical precursor, completely invisible to the naked eye.
So how on earth do we get the blue? We have to initiate a biological breakdown. Step 1, you harvest the green leaves and dump them in a vat of water to ferment. Now, this fermentation process wakes up a specific enzyme naturally present in the plant called indemulsin. Think of this indemulsin enzyme like a pair of tiny, highly precise molecular scissors. It swims right up to that colorless indican compound we just talked about, and it just snips it right down the middle.
And what's really fascinating is the result of that chemical snipping. On one side, we had our original colorless indican compound. But after our molecular scissors do their work, the compound is split into two new pieces. You get simple glucose, which is basically just sugar, and a brand new chemical called indexyl. But here is the absolute punchline. Indexyl is also a completely invisible, colorless liquid. So you've gone through all this complex harvesting and fermentation just to be left staring at a vat of clear water.
But this brings us to the crucial step, the actual trigger. To make that colorless indexylic liquid turn blue, you have to introduce oxygen. And it won't just happen on its own. It requires violent agitation. Historically, workers would literally get down into the vats and aggressively beat the clear liquid with sticks, kicking it high up into the air. This severe aeration introduces atmospheric oxygen to the indexyl. And the exact millisecond those molecules hit the oxygen in the air, they bond together instantly. It is only at this exact moment of extreme aeration that the deep blue pigment, indigotin, finally forms.
But wait, the oxygen reaction doesn't just change the color of the water. As the indigotin forms, it becomes completely insoluble. It physically drops out of the liquid, falling to the bottom of the vat as this incredibly thick, messy, muddy blue sludge. It is heavy, it is dense, and it is finally unmistakably blue.
Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking. Awesome, we finally have blue dye, just dip the shirt in the sludge. No. Come on, that is not how chemistry works. The crucial point here is that indigo tin sludge is completely insoluble in water. If you dip a shirt into it, the blue mud will just wash right off the second it rains. To actually dye clothes, humans had to figure out how to chemically reverse the whole process. They had to use a strong alkaline base to dissolve that blue powder back down into a soluble liquid. And when you do that, it loses its blue color again, becoming a weird yellowish-green liquid known as leucoindigo or white indigo.
Let me ask you a question directly. If you stood over a vat of bubbling yellow-green liquid, dipped a plain white piece of fabric into it, pulled it out, and watched it spontaneously turn deep blue right in front of your eyes, is this chemical transformation more like magic? Because I gotta say, to the untrained eye, for thousands of years, this looked exactly like pure sorcery. You are pulling something totally unexpected out of that vat.
And this brilliantly illustrates the wild, color-shifting reality of the indigo dyeing process. You take your fabric, and you dip it into the leucoindigo vat. When you extract it, the material is bright yellow-green, but the second you pull it out, the final step begins. The dye is immediately exposed to atmospheric oxygen. The chemical reaction reverses itself one last time right before your eyes. The dye oxidizes, shifts rapidly from yellow to green, and finally locks into the fibers as a rich, intensely permanent, completely insoluble blue.
I really want you to pause and think about the societal impact of a dye that is that chemically permanent. Let me challenge you for a second with a little trivia. Why do you think common jeans and manual labor uniforms are called blue collar? It's a phrase we use every single day, but the root of it lies entirely in the specific chemistry we were just talking about.
The answer completely comes down to permanence and practicality. Because the indigo dye is fundamentally insoluble once it oxidizes inside the fabric fibers, it doesn't wash out. This extremely permanent chemical dye was incredibly effective at masking the daily dirt and grime of the Industrial Revolution. It hid tough, black grease stains better than anything else on the market. Because of this, indigo-dyed denim became the definitive, ultimate standard uniform for manual laborers, train workers, and miners, literally coining the famous term blue collar.
But of course, this massive global demand for the ultimate blue dye had a deeply dark side, creating a devastating historical domino effect. Back in the 1850s, the British East India Company ruthlessly forced Indian farmers to grow indigo instead of vital food crops, which was an oppressive system that directly led to widespread starvation. This exact oppression is what sparked the massive indigo revolt of 1859 in Bengal. And the exploitation didn't stop there. It continued for decades, eventually fueling the historic Champaran protest in 1917, led by none other than Mahatma Gandhi. But interestingly, the agricultural reign of the indigo plant was already doomed. By 1897, the German chemical giant BASF figured out how to mass-produce synthetic indigo in a lab. This brilliant bit of chemistry completely crashed the global plantation economy almost overnight.
Which brings us to this absolutely staggering number, 40,000. Today, we don't really rely on massive plantations of green leaves to get our fix of the invisible blue glitch. Instead, we churn out over 40,000 tons of synthetic indigo in factories every single year. And almost the entire bulk of that massive chemical output is created for one singular purpose, just to dye our denim jeans.
When you step back and look at the whole picture, it is an absolutely absurd loop. I mean, think about it. We started with a completely colorless chemical hidden inside a green leaf. We figured out how to break it down, beat it with oxygen until it turned into blue mud, chemically reverse it into a soluble yellow liquid, and then oxidize it again on a piece of cotton just to make blue fabric. We decoded a massively complex chemical loop and built an entire global fashion empire entirely on a plant's biological glitch.
So the very next time you put on a pair of blue jeans, just remember, a green leaf that has to be fermented into a clear liquid, precipitated into a blue sludge, and dissolved into a yellow liquid before it can finally dye your clothes blue is the whole reason we even have the phrase blue collar. Honestly, it makes you wonder what other massive global glitches we are casually wearing every single day, doesn't it? Now that's absolutely wild.